Most people who experienced childhood emotional neglect have no idea it happened to them. Not because it wasn't real, but because it left no visible marks, no dramatic event to point to, no single moment they can trace back to. Just a quiet, persistent absence. The absence of being seen, of being asked how they felt, of having someone in the room who was actually emotionally present for them. Psychologist Dr. Jonice Webb, who spent decades researching and naming this phenomenon, defines childhood emotional neglect as the failure of parents to respond enough to a child's emotional needs. Not cruelty, not abuse, just the consistent, chronic failure to notice what the child was feeling and respond to it meaningfully. And here is what makes it so difficult to recognize in your own life. Unlike other forms of childhood harm, emotional neglect happens not because of something that occurred, but because of something that didn't. Those non-events leave a deep imprint that often reappears in adulthood as confusion about needs, difficulty trusting closeness, and repeated patterns that feel completely normal because they are all you have ever known. These 7 habits feel normal. They feel like personality. They feel like just who you are. Psychology says they are something else entirely. The first one, you apologize constantly for everything, for existing in spaces you are fully entitled to exist in. You apologize for asking a question, for taking up someone's time, for having an opinion, for being inconvenienced by something that genuinely inconveniences you. You apologize before you even begin a sentence, as if the mere act of speaking requires a preemptive excuse for the burden it might create. Most people who do this have been told their entire lives that it is just politeness, just manners, just being considerate. Psychology says something different. Neglect teaches a child that their needs are a nuisance. In adulthood, this turns into a loud inner critic that shames you for having any desires at all. You find yourself constantly apologizing for taking up space, feeling like an imposter in your own life. When a child's emotional needs are consistently unmet, they do not conclude that their caregiver is failing them. Children are not built to draw that conclusion. It is too destabilizing. Instead, they conclude that the need itself is the problem, that wanting things, feeling things, needing things is somehow excessive, and they spend the rest of their lives apologizing for needs they were never taught they had the right to have. The apology that comes before every sentence you speak is not humility. It is a wound wearing the costume of a virtue. The second one, you cannot receive love, compliments, or help without immediately deflecting them. Someone pays you a genuine compliment, and before they have finished the sentence, you are already minimizing it. Someone offers to help you, and something in your chest constricts, and you say, "No, I'm fine. I do not need it." Someone loves you openly and warmly, and instead of receiving it fully, you find yourself waiting for it to be taken away, scanning for the catch, unable to simply sit in being loved without immediately wondering what it will eventually cost you. This is one of the most documented adult signatures of childhood emotional neglect in all of psychology. The lack of validation in childhood can lead to internalized beliefs that your feelings are unimportant or unwelcome. This makes it profoundly difficult to accept care from others in adulthood, because care was not a consistent feature of your emotional environment when your nervous system was being built. Your nervous system learned what the world reliably provided, and what it reliably provided was not consistent warmth, not dependable emotional availability, not the steady experience of being cared for simply because you existed. So when someone offers those things now, when they offer love that does not require you to earn it, your body does not know what to do with it. It does not recognize the territory. And what we do not recognize, we push away, deflect, or quietly destroy before it can disappoint us first. Receiving love is a skill, and it can only be learned in an environment where love was consistently given. If that environment was absent, the skill never developed. That is not a character flaw. That is developmental math. The third one, you are relentlessly, exhaustingly self-sufficient, and you have always thought of it as your greatest strength. You do not ask for help, you do not delegate, you do not let people see you struggling. You handle every crisis, every problem, every weight alone. Not because you prefer it that way, but because on some level you cannot access the alternative. Needing someone feels not just uncomfortable, but genuinely dangerous in a way you've never been able to fully explain. In neglectful environments, children learn that asking for help is a losing game. As a result, they become hyper-independent. They handle every crisis alone, even when there are people around who could help. To them, needing someone feels like a dangerous vulnerability. This is the one that is most often mistaken for a virtue because our culture glorifies self-sufficiency without asking what it cost to build it. Independence developed freely from a place of security is a genuine strength. Independence developed as a survival adaptation because no one was reliably available is a trauma response wearing the clothes of a personality trait. You may be hyper-independent because you had to take care of your own emotional needs or were forced to grow up before you were ready to. And the child who learned to carry everything alone became the adult who cannot put anything down, not because they are strong, but because somewhere inside them they are still the child who learned that putting it down meant no one was going to pick it up. The fourth one. You have a profound, almost constitutional difficulty identifying what you actually feel. Someone asks how you are doing and you say fine. Not because you are fine, but because when you reach inward to find out what you actually are, the information is not clearly there. Emotions are not a rich, accessible interior landscape. They are a blurry background noise you have spent so much of your life turning down that you can no longer locate the specific frequency. Psychologists call this alexithymia, difficulty identifying and describing one's own emotions, and it is one of the most direct neurological consequences of emotional neglect in childhood. When caregivers fail to respond to a child's emotional experience, when no one names what the child is feeling, mirrors it back, or validates it as real and important, children develop significant difficulty identifying and expressing their feelings, leading to emotional numbing and a fundamental disconnection from their own interior experience that can persist throughout their entire adult lives. Emotions are learned in relationship. A child learns what sadness is, what anger is, what longing is, what joy is, because a caregiver looks at them in those states and says, "You are feeling this. It is real, it makes sense, and it is safe." Without that mirroring, the feelings do not disappear. They simply go unlabeled, unnamed. And unnamed feelings cannot be processed. They accumulate. And they surface in ways that feel confusing and disproportionate because the adult experiencing them has never had the language to understand what they are actually experiencing. The fifth one. You are a people pleaser and you have tried to stop 100 times and you cannot figure out why it keeps happening. You cannot say no without a wave of guilt so intense it almost feels physical. You read rooms constantly, monitoring the emotional temperature of every person around you, adjusting yourself in real time to maintain their comfort. You suppress your own preferences, your own needs, your own truth in service of keeping a peace that was never actually yours to maintain. Adults raised with childhood emotional neglect may struggle to name their own preferences or hold their own boundaries, defaulting to people-pleasing or emotional shutdown to avoid disapproval. This isn't a personality type. This is an adaptive behavior that was extraordinarily intelligent in the environment it was developed in. A child in an emotionally neglectful home often learns to become an expert reader of caregiver mood, because if you could sense when the caregiver was unhappy and position yourself to not add to it, you were slightly safer, slightly less ignored. The child who learned to monitor and adjust became the adult who cannot stop. People-pleasing tendencies emerge from a core belief that your emotions and needs are not important. They lead to unbalanced relationships where you feel chronically drained and unappreciated, but unable to change the dynamic because the alternative, taking up space, having needs, asking for reciprocity, feels more dangerous than the exhaustion. The sixth one. You feel a vague but persistent sense of emptiness that you cannot explain and cannot seem to fill. Not depression exactly, not a specific sadness about a specific thing, just a background hollowness, a sense that something is missing that you cannot name. You chase experiences, achievements, connections, substances, stimulation, and the emptiness persists, not because you are ungrateful or broken, but because the thing that is missing is not something that exists in the external world. What is missing is the experience, in early childhood, of being fully received by another person, the developmental experience of having someone look at the complete reality of you, your feelings, your fears, your needs, your joy, and respond to all of it with genuine, consistent presence. Chronic emotional neglect damages self-worth at its root. Adults may disregard their own emotions, let others take advantage of them, and struggle with self-compassion and self-love. A sense of emotional numbness develops as a protective mechanism, and underneath that numbness is an emptiness that no external achievement or relationship has the architecture to fill, because what created it happened before the self was fully formed. The emptiness is not a mystery, it is a developmental gap. And acknowledging it honestly, not as a life sentence, but as a real thing with a real origin, is often the first moment the filling actually begins. The seventh one, you have an almost visceral discomfort with conflict to the point where you will silently absorb enormous amounts of pain rather than say the true thing out loud. Someone hurts you and you say nothing. Someone crosses a line and you make excuses for them. A relationship is slowly eating you alive and you cannot bring yourself to name what is happening because the possibility of the conversation going badly feels more dangerous than the certainty of the pain continuing. Research from 2016 and 2018 suggests that childhood emotional neglect is most commonly linked to an anxious avoidant attachment style in adulthood. As a child, when someone you rely on is not emotionally responsive, your ability to trust others becomes fundamentally impaired. As an adult, you may experience fear of intimacy, become emotionally unavailable, or develop a deep distrust of other people's motives, even when they are genuinely good. In a home where emotions were not welcomed, the child learned that expressing emotional truth was not safe. Not because they were told so explicitly, but because every time they tried, every time they brought their real feelings to the adults in the room, those feelings were met with dismissal, minimization, or simply nothing. And a child who brings their truth to people who cannot hold it learns eventually to stop bringing it, to keep the peace, to swallow the thing that is true rather than risk the silence or the discomfort that follows. That child grew up, but the lesson remained, and now every conflict, even a small one, even a necessary one, even one that would resolve everything, feels like standing in front of that original silence, and the body will do almost anything to avoid standing there again. If you recognized yourself in any of these, that recognition itself matters. Not because it changes the past. The past is exactly what it was, and naming it does not alter what happened inside a home you did not choose and could not leave. But because the most insidious feature of childhood emotional neglect is that it convinces you these patterns are just who you are. That the apologies, the hyper-independence, the emptiness, the people-pleasing, the conflict avoidance, that these are your personality, fixed, permanent, simply you. They are not you. They are what you built to survive an environment that did not give you what you needed. And what was built for survival inside a specific set of circumstances can be rebuilt, carefully and deliberately, for a different kind of life. Healing from childhood emotional neglect is possible. Researchers have established that with appropriate support and intervention, adults can address and recover from its effects. Not by going back, not by confronting parents who may not even remember or understand what they did or did not do, but by doing, slowly and with support, the work that was supposed to happen in childhood and didn't. Learning to name feelings, learning to receive care without bracing for it to disappear. Learning that having needs is not the same as being a burden. Learning that the truth of what you feel deserves a voice, and that the voice does not have to apologize before it speaks. You were not too much. You were never too much. You were simply in rooms that were too small for everything you were.